Hello, welcome back. This is Jeff Byers, and this is Andy 255, and this is Module 1. We're going to talk about the introduction to N particles and the classic particles that Maya came with before they got N particles. And so, what are N particles? And what are classic particles? Well, we'll talk about both of those, and we're going to show you both, but we're going to start with classic particles because they're a lot easier to control. We'll get you used to using those, and then we're going to move you into N particles, which will have a lot more attributes, and it's a little more advanced. So we're going to start with classic particles, but I'm going to talk about N particles right now. So N particles basically are a particle generation system that uses the Maya nucleus. And it's the same dynamic simulation framework that generates N-cloth simulations. An N-particle object can collide and interact with other N-particle objects, which classic particles can't, as well as with N-cloth and passive collision objects. For collisions to occur, all the participating objects must be assigned to the same nucleus solver. As a nucleus object, and particles support N constraints and respond to the internal forces generated by the nucleus solver. So between the two classic particle systems that Maya started with and the N particles, the main difference is the nucleus that is generating, that allows them to have to see each other, to self-collide and collide with other nucleus particles, or cloth that has nucleus on it as well. So they have to have the same nucleus for them to see each other. So Nucleus Dynamics allow users to create particle effects and dynamic simulations that cannot be achieved with Maya classic particles. Again, like I talked about earlier, and you'll see this when we start demonstrating. When you see me demonstrating the Maya classic particles, you'll notice that they will not collide with each other. They don't see each other, but they will collide with other objects. And we'll talk about that. Okay, for example, with the N particles, look at simulation attributes allow you to create particles that behave like liquids, which can interact and drive N-cloth animations and deformations. Maya N particles also include an improved workflow for setting per particle attributes using ramps, and expands the number of properties and options that can be mapped to per particle attributes. Alright, so they will have a lot more attributes. It can be very confusing, so that's where we're going to start with just Maya classic particles. So N particles use the classic particle render types. So they're both the same that way, including point, streaks, and blobby surfaces, and can be used in place of Maya classic particles for particle goals, geometry instancing, and sprite effects. Now, N particles do not replace Maya classic particles. In some instances, you may choose to use Maya classic particles instead of N particles, especially if you want your particle effect and it requires a very high particle count and does not require N particles advanced simulation features. So here's the thing, if you can't get something to work with N particles because you have to have a lot of particles in the simulation, then what you would do is you would use classic particles. And so we're going to start with classic particles first, show you the difference between the two, and then we're going to move you up into the N particles because we want to see what your computer can handle. Okay, how we can control classic Maya particles first, and test your machine to see how it works. I think that's the best way to go. And we're going to move our way up into N particles. Don't worry, we'll get into that. N particles are a lot more advanced. So we're going to start with Maya classic particles. So let's go ahead and get started in the next video, but I wanted to kind of take you into the introduction to particles and this little simulation as well. Okay, alright, so we'll see you in the next video.